Welcome to this presentation on the 6 core emotions which cause unhappiness and illness. My name is Kim Knight, founder of the Emotional Alchemy Academy. What we're going to be looking at in this presentation are the 6 core emotions which lead to life problems. And these life problems can include things like unhappiness and illness, but also other problems such as relationship issues, work problems, financial problems, all types of problems. We're going to be looking at what triggers these 6 core emotions and their deeper hidden meaning, and which organs and tissues in the body are detrimentally affected if we store these emotions inside of us. And then we're going to be looking at the transformation that ultimately we want to achieve and experience instead of holding on to all these old emotions. Now, as the saying goes, emotions buried alive never die. And the reason for this is that emotions are a form of energy, and if we store, either consciously but usually unconsciously, our emotions inside of us, or we don't deal with situations which are creating unhappy, uncomfortable emotions, then they're going to stay inside of us. And that is due to the law of physics, which says that once energy is generated, it cannot be destroyed, but it can be transformed. And that's what we can learn to do. So we need to be able to self-manage our feelings if we want to stay happy and healthy. Now, the 6 core emotions we're going to be looking at in this presentation are anger, sadness, hurt, loneliness, fear, and lack of joy. And one thing that we need to remember is that we are a holistic being. We're not just a physical body. We have our mind, which includes our conditioning, our beliefs, our memories, our patterns of thinking, our programming, everything to do with how we think. And then we have our feelings, which is all about our emotions. We have the spiritual side of ourselves, which is different for each person. And then we have our physical body or matter. And when we're talking about emotions, we need to take all of this into account, because whatever happens on any one of these levels is simultaneously going to impact every other level. So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at these 6 core emotions and their related emotions and the spectrum that they sit on. We're going to look at why it is that these emotions are triggered inside of us. We're going to look at which organs and tissues may be affected and what related mind patterns we may have. And then we're going to look at the positive transformation that we would really like. We'll start with anger. One of the main reasons that we feel angry is because we have an unmet expectation. We can also feel angry if we're treated unfairly. And we can also feel angry if we are in danger or perceived danger. It's an automatic response from the body as a self-protective mechanism. Some of the events which trigger anger include things like feeling let down, mistreated, deceived, or rejected. Now that is in relation to other people doing that to us. But one of the most missed reasons for anger is actually what we do to ourselves. If we mistreat ourselves and we don't take care of ourselves, we don't respect ourselves, we don't have enough self-care, our body will send anger and frustration because it needs us to take care of it so that it can do what we want it to do. Also, if we have very high standards, such as perfectionism, or we drive ourselves too hard, and this is the A-type personality, then our body will also start to send frustration if we're driving ourselves too hard, because what it means is we're being a slave driver to ourselves, and our body is not happy about that. So the body will create and send us anger or frustration when it wants to get our attention, because either we're not being treated well by somebody else or we're not treating ourselves well. And it can also respond with anger when we're in a crisis or a danger situation, and that is the natural protective mechanism as a result of feeling afraid. The emotions which relate to anger can range from anything from slightly ticked off to annoyed to frustrated to angry and up to rage. And if we get stuck in anger, or the anger gets stuck inside us, and we're not able to clear it, then what will happen is we'll stay stuck in our head and we'll be overthinking. So we may, for example, have a story going round and round in our head over and over again. And the reason that's happening is because we're not allowing ourselves to be in touch with the anger and to clear it. And until we actually clear the emotion, the story and the overthinking and whatever else is going on in our mind will continue. And in Chinese medicine, the organs and tissues in the body which relate to anger are the liver and the gallbladder, which relate to the nervous system and the eyes. So if we're storing anger inside of us, and anger is one of the most toxic emotions we can experience, the liver is the organ which is charged with detoxification in our body. So normally most people think of physical detoxification, but also our liver has to deal with emotional detoxification. And if we store anger inside of us, it can clog up the energy pathways of the liver and the gallbladder. And the emotions of resentment, jealousy, and envy can really affect the gallbladder. So of course we don't really want to continue experiencing anger, although it can become quite an addiction, like any emotion can. And instead, what we really want is to feel a sense of inner calm. And the natural positive energy which resides in the liver is kindness and generosity. So what we want to be cultivating is more kindness towards ourselves as well as other people, and generosity towards ourselves and other people. We also want to experience more compassion and understanding and forgiveness. And this is all possible if we learn how to clear the anger and the frustration out of our body. The next emotion is sadness. And sadness really comes in response to a loss or even a perceived loss. In other words, the loss may be real or it may not have happened yet, but we can still experience that sadness. So sadness is to do with bereavements or maybe a breakup with a partner, and it can also be connected with the loss of an object. So I don't mean you've mislaid the object, I mean you no longer have that object. Maybe it was stolen from you, maybe it was taken away, maybe your car was taken away, your house was taken away, you were robbed. There's some sort of loss of an object. And also we can feel sad over a lost opportunity. The related emotions are disappointment and grief and upset. So grief would be a furtherance of sadness. And if we don't deal with our sadness, what's going to happen is our mind is going to go into overthinking and rehashing what happened and maybe even worrying. Worrying especially if it's about a perceived potential loss in the near future. And in Chinese medicine, the organs which relate to the emotion of sadness and grief are the lungs and the large intestine, which in turn relate to the skin and the nose as the outer sensory organ. And we know this because when we feel sad, we feel it in our chest, and it is affecting our lungs, and it can get stored in our lungs and also the large intestine. Now, the large intestine is the organ which is all about letting go of what we don't need. And if we don't let go of our sadness, then it can get lodged in our large intestine. So I'll share a true story of how sadness created severe physical pain because it wasn't let go of. Many years ago, I was working with a lady. She was in her 70s, and she came to see me after coming out of hospital. She had been in hospital for 3 months, and she was in hospital for severe abdominal pain. And even though they did multiple tests and many invasive tests, they never found a cause for the severe pain. So she left the hospital still with the pain. She came to see me, and in our second session, What came to light was that her mother had died some years earlier, and she had been in hospital, very ill, and her daughter had gone to see her, and then the next day came back to visit her and discovered that her mother had died overnight. She went into an immediate shock, and she was also unable to process that sadness and that grief because she'd been brought up that you don't deal with your emotions, you don't look at your emotions, you just ignore them and you push them away. But just because she was ignoring the emotions doesn't mean that they're not there and they're not going to have their effect. So slowly over time, this emotional energy started to have its effect in a physical way inside her body. And this was some 20 years before that her mother had died. But by the time she came to see me, she was in this chronic pain. Now, as she recognized this sadness and this grief, which she had never allowed herself to let go of, the pain dissolved immediately. Now, this shows the power of emotions to cause severe physical pain, and it also shows how quickly we can release physical pain if we identify and release the emotion. So, this emotion of grief had literally got lodged in her large intestine in the place where she was feeling the physical pain. And of course, when they'd done the investigations in the hospital, they'd not been able to find anything physical because it wasn't physical. It was emotional, it was energetic, but it was still being held in place in the physical body, and that was why she was experiencing physical pain. So, of course, instead of sadness and grief, we want to experience things like inner calm, joy, happiness. And we also want to experience more of the positive virtue for the lungs and large intestine, which is courage and also honesty and respect. The next emotion is hurt. And usually we feel hurt because we feel upset. And the events or the triggers are likely to be some form of disappointment, or maybe some mistreatment, or maybe unmet expectations, or maybe even betrayal. The related emotions are anything from upset to devastation. And if we don't deal with the upset and the hurt which is inside of us, then our mind will take over, and again it will go into overthinking and rehashing the situation, and we will stay stuck in our head. But one of the things that we have to learn is that emotions are irrational and thoughts are rational, and we can't think our feelings away. I'll say that again because it's so important. Emotions are irrational, thoughts are rational, and we can't think our feelings away. This is why it is so essential to have techniques under our belt where we can immediately clear emotional energy so that it doesn't stick around to either make us feel unhappy or ill. The organs and tissues which are affected by storing hurt are the heart. So we store our hurt in our heart, and also the small intestine and the blood, and the tongue is the related sensory organ. So, of course, really what we want to be experiencing is inner peace, love, joy, compassion, and forgiveness. When we let go of the hurt, we're going to experience all the positive emotions instead. The fourth core emotion is fear. And usually we feel fear if we're in danger or there's some sort of survival issue. Now, this danger could be a physical danger, and that danger could be real or perceived. Or it could be an emotional threat, which could also be real or perceived. So this is very important to understand the difference between what we call primary fear and secondary fear. Primary fear is a real survival fear when we're really in physical danger. For example, you just notice that your house is on fire and you have to run out of your house very, very quickly. The body triggers into the stress response, into the fight, flight, or freeze response, in order to survive. Now, the body also triggers into fear and stress if it feels emotionally threatened. And usually for most people, when it comes to physical danger, unless you're living in a war zone, most of the fear we tend to experience is perceived fear. In other words, it's in our mind. and it's created by our thoughts. Emotional fear is usually more common, and this will relate back to our emotional patterning, which was set up in childhood. Now, one useful way of looking at things is to say that we have 4 core fears: the fear of loss, the fear of rejection, the fear of feeling our feelings, and the fear of feeling vulnerable. The related emotions range from anything from fear up to terror, panic, and overwhelm. And if we don't deal with the fear, then again our mind will go into overthinking and worst case scenario thinking and worrying and pessimism and negative thoughts, because the mind is trying to sort the situation out. But unless we actually deal directly with the fear, then we're really not going to solve things. Because as I said before, emotions are irrational, thoughts are rational, and we can't think our feelings away. The organs and tissues which can be affected by fear include the kidneys and the bladder, which relate to the bones and the bone marrow and the ears. And also, if we're doing a lot of worrying, then that is going to affect our stomach, spleen, pancreas, which are connected with the muscles and tendons, and the mouth is the related organ. So, of course, we want more inner peace. And really what we want when we're talking about fear is trust. We want trust and safety. We want to be able to feel complete trust and feel very safe and secure in the world and experience harmony. The 5th emotion is loneliness. And loneliness comes from a feeling of disconnection. The trigger events which are going to trigger feelings of loneliness include being alone, being unsupported, having a lack of friends or family, and also having a lack of tribe. So that will all lead us to feeling disconnected, alone, and lonely. But really, the ultimate real reason that we feel lonely and disconnected is because we're disconnected from our true self. The types of emotions which are going to come along with loneliness are sadness, grief, upset, hurt. And if we don't deal with our loneliness, then we may also in the mind go into overthinking, worst case scenario thinking, worry, and pessimism. There are many different organs and tissues which are affected by loneliness. The fear part of the loneliness can affect our kidneys and bladder. The worry can affect the stomach, spleen, and pancreas. The upset and disappointment and the hurt can affect our heart and small intestine, and the sadness and grief can affect our lungs and large intestine. So loneliness is a very big issue, and it has been shown in experiments to have a greater effect than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we must learn how to deal with loneliness. And of course, what we really want instead is a feeling of deep connection and inner peace and harmony and unification. And that unification means that we're unified with our true self. And the last emotion is lack of joy. And we have lack of joy if we have lack of fulfillment, and also if we have this disconnection from our true self. The types of things which will trigger lack of joy are not following or fulfilling our life purpose, maybe not having enough fun, friends, hobbies, adventure, and also disconnection from true self. If we have lack of joy, we may also experience emotions like boredom, sadness, disappointment, and frustration, which can lead into mind patterns of negativity and pessimism. And the organs and tissues which are affected include the heart and the small intestine because of the lack of joy, and the lungs and the large intestine because of the sadness. And of course, what we really want is more joy, more fulfillment, more happiness, inner harmony, and a deep connection with true self. So these are the 6 core emotions which create a lot of problems in our life. They're going to create unhappiness, and if we don't deal with that unhappiness, that dis-ease may very well turn into disease. So we need to know how to turn that anger into peace, kindness, and forgiveness. How to turn the loneliness into peace and connection. How to turn the sadness into peace, joy, courage, and respect. How to turn the fear into peace, trust, and safety. How to turn the hurt into peace, joy, comfort, and love, and how to turn the lack of joy into joy, love, happiness, and connection. So really what we're saying here is we need to clear away the negativity in order to grow the positivity. Now, a great analogy to explain this is that if we have a sky which is very cloudy, if you go above the clouds, like you may do in a plane, you're going to discover that there is a bright blue sky and sunshine above those clouds, no matter how dark and cloudy it seems if you were on the ground. So what our job is to clear away the clouds of negativity so that we can rediscover the positivity. Now, even though that positivity is already there, we still have to cultivate it, because there's a saying which you may have heard of, which is nature abhors a vacuum. So if there is a dearth of positivity, then negativity will grow in its place. And this is the case for many people. They have become very habituated to experience a lot of negative emotions. So we're going to have to do some work to grow the positivity back, even though those emotions are already inside of us. And one of the ways that we can do that is to transform these negative feelings with a smile, with what is called a cosmic smile. So let me introduce you to this technique which can help you dissolve toxic emotions from the internal organs using a smile. And then at the same time, you can grow positive emotions, which will then also help you reduce and prevent symptoms and enhance your overall well-being. So we can either have negativity or positivity inside of us. The negative emotions create toxicity in the mind and body, whereas the positive emotions create happiness, health, and joy. So which do you want? Well, it's quite obvious, really. Everybody wants the positive stuff, but we have to work at it. If we have patterns and years of thinking negatively and having traumatic events happen to us, which have built up a backlog of negative emotions inside of us, we're going to have to do something to clear them, because they won't disappear by themselves. We actually actively have to do something about it. And the inner smile meditation is a really simple way to do something about it. So I invite you to come on a journey with me and learn the inner smile meditation so that you can clear negativity from inside your body in order to experience more positive energy. And as a result of that, you're going to feel a lot happier and healthier and be able to experience a lot more success in your life. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the program.